Welcome to the first of our faith interviews. We've got Father Mathew with us today. Father Mathew, you're our assistant priest.
Yes,
And
I am.
how long have you been here?
We've known this parish for about 10, 12 years now. I actually first came here as to deacon at Father Felix's licensing here.
So that was about 20 years ago now.
2006, yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
20 years ago.
20 years ago, exactly. Yeah, so that's when I first came to this church and got to know the inside of the building. But then, quirky as it is, 2 or 3 years later, Susan, my wife, happened to be running past this church one day and saw pins and hymns being advertised, and we thought that sounds
fun.
Yes, so we came to that service and got to know the service a bit and found out about the 8 o'clock service on a Sunday morning, and also the Saturday morning service, the Eucharistia. So we thought that would be a good idea. So we started coming to both.
Okay.
And that left us the opportunity to go to the Ascension where I was based. I was minister at the Ascension in part of All Saints Latcham. And so I could go to the service there, take the service then at 10:15 or 10:30 as it
So you could come to church here
and then go over there
as a sort of worshipper.
Absolutely.
And then go and do your ordained role up in West Dean.
Yeah, and I thought that was quite good actually, because there were 2 different traditions I was part of. And that was nothing new to me because I grew up in that kind of background. My first memories of church are, again, quite interesting. Remember being on my dad's shoulder, hanging outside the church while the church is crowded with lots of people outside in Singapore, worshipping. It was a Martoma service. And those services tend to go on a little bit, very, very much like a high Anglican service in that it's very traditional with a lot of incense and a lot of liturgy. And so people tended to drift around outside, especially the men. So it's a great excuse for them with the children.
And so the Martoma Church, that's the church you grew up in?
Yes.
And what's the background of that?
Well, the Mathew Church is part of the Syrian Orthodox tradition in Kerala in southern India. It's, we say it's 2,000 years old. AD 52 is when St. Thomas is meant to have
they
gone.
say that St. Thomas went and started the church there.
Exactly, yeah. So we have that history, and there are rudiments of a church there, and had been for a very long time. But it was when the Portuguese came in the 17th century, when they were really becoming important. Although they came in 1496, that's when they became influential down in the south beyond Goa. And they started to influence the way the church worked there, tried to become more dominant and trying to bring Catholicism to us. And it worked for 50 years, and then we separated, and then we became much more interested in our own ancient history and went back to Syria, to Antioch, and aligned ourselves with the patriarch there. So that's where it started.
And so you're an Anglican now?
Yes.
How did that happen? So you grew up going to church in the Martoma Church?
Well, it's interesting. On the Air Force Base in Singapore, there was an Anglican church and a Methodist church. So we'd go there 3 Sundays a month on average. And one Sunday we'd go to the center of Singapore where there's a Martoma service once a month. So I was used to both, yeah.
So you grew up going to church, but at what point did it stop being something that you just did because that's what your parents took you to? And at what point did you start to think, actually, this is what I believe for myself?
Yeah. I think growing up in church was important. So for me, it was natural to think of God as being real. And I think that I had an experience at the age of 6. And I would say it's an experience of meeting God, but I didn't realize that, of course, at the time, being too young. But it made me question, and I believed what my parents were talking about. And then we moved to India for 3 years in the 60s, and after my dad came here. And we decided to go to the local church. My grandmother was a very big influence at that time, insisted we went to church, insisted we got up at 4 or 5 in the morning and prayed and worshipped and so on, which is what she did. And we did the same in the evening. So there's a routine of doing that. And then, so I went to Sunday school, of course, and then there's a boys' camp when I was about 12. And that's when the vicar, I remember, convicted us. Do you really believe? If you do, this is the time to make a personal commitment. And I thought to myself, yes, actually, I do believe. And I made a commitment then. So I sort of made the commitment at the age of 12. And then then we came here, a lot of traumas, changing cultures and so on. But then over a period of time, I began to believe that faith was what actually helped me to survive the different changes.
Mm.
And so I became a very firm Christian by the time I was about 17. Went off to university a little later, and things changed. And I became a non-practicing Christian for about 10 years,
Okay.
basically. Yeah.
So for that period of your life where you didn't really go to church, you still believed?
I did believe. I had a Bible with me, and I read it most days, and I prayed every day. But I just felt church and I were two different entities. You know, most of my friends were non-Christian. In fact, there were hardly any Christians at all. And I met a lot of people who are Muslims and Hindus and others, and I, for the first time actually, and started to explore what they believed in. And that was great. Even met the Moonies, who tried very hard to persuade me to become a Moonie, and Jehovah's Witnesses, of course, as well. So it was actually a very good time of exploration. And I just felt that God was actually showing me the wide variety of peoples and so on. And all through that, I came through and realized that I was definitely a Christian. I believed in Jesus, and I knew why I believed in him, and spent a lot of time discussing it with others.
Yeah. So you're a priest now. How long have you been a priest?
I was ordained in 2005.
So there was a lot of your adult life where what did you do after university?
Well, when I finally finished my PhD and came back home, as it were, I was dragged back into the Martoma community.
Okay.
Because there was a service in London.
What was your PhD in?
In biomedical applications of polymers.
So nothing to do with faith?
Nothing to do with faith at all. It's all physics, yes. Actually, I was very interested in particle physics especially, and was interested in going into that area of research, but as opportunities didn't come up, so I decided to look elsewhere. My tutor suggested polymer physics, and drifted in that direction and loved it. So I thought it's a great area, newish area, so it was very good. So basically,
so you finished your PhD, and then what was your career? What did you?
I was looking for a job in research, and it was a time of a recession of time in the early 80s, and nobody wanted people in polymer physics as such. So I looked at composites as well, and I was not quite in composites. And then this opportunity to go into College of Technology to teach came up, and I thought I'll just do that for a while. Found these strange people, 16-year-olds, and I had to teach. It was quite an experience actually, but I loved it and got to know about industry, the industrial world generally, and thought this is what I want to be. So I decided to focus on research. Then moved up to Brighton Polytechnic as it was, because I thought it's a chance for me to rebuild a research career, which is what I did. I started building a career in recycling polymers in the end. So I worked in that area for about 30 years. But I was also active in church right the way through all that period.
So how did you, so one of the things that people, and it's something that I get a lot because my first degree was in physics as well. And people say, but science and religion, they don't go together. How, throughout your 30 years of, and you still do teaching in that now, don't you, on the side, because retirement is clearly not going very well for you. How do you, how has that physics and the science, rather than being something that has obviously made you think that faith can't be real, it's obviously done the opposite. How has science made your faith stronger?
I remember in school having discussions, especially at A-levels, with students about faith, and it was a time when it was very much the popular thing to put down faith and Christianity and so on generally. So it just made me think about all these issues and what was faith, why is it that I believed? For me, it was automatic. I believed in God. I knew the presence of God in my life, I felt, and I was very confident in that. But I felt this was not the world that I was living in. So I think it really made me think. But then at the same time, physics was very important, science. And, I believe totally in the fact that we are created and creation is so wonderful. Laws are so real. Everything is structured in this world. I thought, it's logical. If everything is so organized and we've got all these laws we can work out and we can understand and can use mathematics to work out and say, and maths proves this works. And then sure enough, it does. And I remember doing an experiment or a bit of background research on Newton and gravitation and the whole theory. And I thought, wow, you could use mathematics and these ideas and work out from little theories that, the apple dropping on the ground on Earth is the same as the moon going around the Earth. It was incredible. So to me, it just showed me the wonder of the world. and reading Psalms and so on. It just made sense to me.
I remember really clearly being at university in the observatory and looking up this telescope. And at the end of the telescope, there was the planet Saturn. And it looked kind of, it was this big. You could see the rings round it, and you could see the little moons whizzing round. Right. And I remember thinking, this is so ridiculously perfect and beautiful. Yeah. How can God not exist?
Exactly. Yeah.
And there's the Psalms. You say things like, the heavens proclaim the glory of the Lord. And I thought, that is that. That's exactly what it is. Exactly. That's what it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But in 2005, you were ordained.
Yeah.
What? How did you feel that God was calling you to do something different?
Well, there was a great couple at All Saints Patcham who is quite interesting. When we left Northampton, where we'd been at a college of technology, where we didn't really get to know a local church properly. I mean, we went occasionally and so on. We were more involved in the Mathew in London, so we go down there every month. And before coming, I prayed, is this the right place for me to go to? So I always prayed before any decision. And I felt God was leading me this way. And circumstances led me to come here rather than to a place in London instead. And so I loved it. But on my first day at work, this old gentleman walked into my office and knocked on the door and introduced himself. And he said he'd been doing the job and he had to retire. He was forced to retire, as it were. He loved teaching. And he had developed the whole Parliament area within this department. So I was taking over things. It was great to talk to him. Then he said, you've got a Christian name. Are you from a Christian background? That's how he started.
Right.
Talked about this, and it turned out that he knew about the Mathew Church and my background. And he was a reader at All Saints Patcham.
Okay.
And so, a God incident rather than a coincidence.
Yeah.
We had found a house in West Dean at that time in the same parish. He said, great, you've got a church just down the road at Ascension. You can go there. And I said, yes, great. So 3 weeks after this transition, when we finally moved to Brighton, he said, well, you can come over to All Saints Patcham first if you like. Went over to All Saints Patcham at the end of January of that year, 88. And everyone knew us.
They knew who you were. He told them all.
Exactly, yes, yeah. It was wonderful, really. A great welcome.
Yeah.
And then we went across to Ascension the following week. It was exactly the same. Everyone knew us there too. So it was a great welcome. So we just felt God had placed us in the right place there.
And then what? And then you felt a calling to ordination?
Yeah. So I was very involved in church. And then Ron Elkin, he died in 1998. I just felt he was such a faithful man. And he'd done the kind of things I'd done. So I just felt that God was calling me in the same direction. So I explored the idea and talked to the vicar, Neil Millman, at the time and said, I'd like to think about being a reader. And he said, great idea. So before I knew, PCC approved and I was off for training. But as I started training within months, he said to me, have you thought about ordination? And that made me think again. And I think I had to pray about this for quite a bit of time, about 6 months before finally thinking maybe this is the right way. So I applied and was selected, and I went off to, was approved and given a place in training at Sarum College before I'd finished my reader training. But then I thought it was unfair on the parish if I just went off suddenly and left this they'd invested in. So I worked as a reader for a year before
going off to training.
Yeah, I did.
And so you've been here for, you've been in this parish sort of entirely for the last 5 or 6 years?
Since 2020, 6 years, just over 6 years. Yeah, exactly.
What would you say to somebody who, this church is really, we're very lucky in that our church is quite big and it's on the top of a hill and lots of people know that it's here. And people come down Dyke Road and they wait for the bus outside. What would you say to someone who was looking at this building and wondering about what was inside? What would you hope that they would find if they were to walk in here?
On a Sunday, if they were to walk in on a Sunday and see the crowd of people here, I would hope they'd feel that it's a warm, welcoming space. It's not a foreign environment. So I think I'd hope that they would not be concerned about the mystery as much as the fact that it's a nice, homely, warm place to come into. That's what I'd hope. It depends on whether they have a faith. I mean, a lot of people, of course, we know have a background in faith from the past, perhaps, which they've rejected or given up for some reason. And so if they have that, it might just tug on some strings and draw them to make make them want to be curious about this. I hope they also feel that this is a place where people are friendly to each other. They sort of look after each other. There's no sense of strangers coming together as such. I would hope that as well.
One of the a lovely scene I remember from on a Tuesday afternoon when we have tea, there was a little girl who came with her granny for a couple of weeks, and she was just learning to walk.
Right.
She was pushing one of those walker trolley things down the aisle. And next to her was another person who no longer can come to church much on a Sunday, Sue. But she's able to come on a Tuesday afternoon when someone brings her, and she's got one of those walkers.
Yeah.
And it was the sight of this 13-month-old and this, I don't know how old she is, 80-something-year-old, both pushing their trolleys, grinning. And I thought, this is kind of what church is about, the two generations. And I think it's something here that we do quite well, is that the breadth of generations and the breadth of backgrounds. And everyone is just very friendly to each other, looks after each other, and notices when you're not there. And it's that real sense of community that actually is missing quite a lot in our society today.
Yes, it's very much an extended family, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And so my last question: what would you say to somebody who was thinking about faith, felt this sort of niggling sense of, maybe there is something more? What would you say to them? I suppose, what would you say to your 12-year-old self about where faith might lead them and how you might grow and explore that? Like what has helped you to grow and explore in your faith? What do you do now to help you grow in your faith?
I think life is full of challenges. Coming to faith does not mean that you lose that there are no challenges anymore. There have been difficult times, and especially I think when you feel safest in your faith, you suddenly find yourself in directions where you may not have thought you'd be going. Like going to university, for example, it was the same for me. Suddenly going to a world where I was not close to a church that I knew, and people all knew, there were lots of new experiences and so on, and you suddenly question whether your world is real and so on. That's one thing. So I think people who come to have this niggling faith will come with that kind of experience of having lots of distractions in their lives, and this is just one thing. They're initially just curious, and I think I would encourage them to be more to pursue that faith, what it is there, and ask those fundamental questions, because I think it's only in difficult situations that you ask yourself those questions. What's life all about for me? Where am I going? Is this all there is in life, and so on? And I think and you need to be prepared for those. So if you can provide some answers, which help them to say, well, actually, there is something more than this. You just have to look in this direction. God is real. God is in overall control of the world. He's not just in control, but he's a great protector, a great provider. He's the one who makes everything work. He's a sustainer and so on. So you just have to look around and see the world. For me today, I think, in semi-retirement, going on walks and seeing the countryside and just looking up and seeing the greenery, seeing life, birds and so on.
It's such a beautiful part of the world, isn't it? It's so lovely.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it just opens something inside you, it makes you feel, that's a spiritual world, a sense of it's beyond your emotions. It makes you feel there is something special here. It's beyond logic, isn't it?
You can't, and I think especially if you're someone like you or me with a science training, everything has to be logical and have a reason. And sometimes it's just wonderful to appreciate for what it is.
Absolutely, yeah. Exactly.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.